Hey, welcome back to Meraki Unboxed. My name is Simon Thompson. I am the host of the Meraki Unboxed podcast, which we do every couple of weeks, which we cover technology and we cover the culture, life at Meraki, and try and provide you with an interesting and entertaining and informative period of time. I was about to say half an hour, but it's varying all over the place. And so you can find me online at Meraki Simon on Twitter, and definitely do encourage you to reach out. Really want to make sure that we're making this podcast informative and entertaining for you and useful. We want to know what you would love us to cover. Now, today, I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Jeevan, from he is the head of product marketing. Welcome, Jeevan. Welcome back.
Thank you, Simon. I thought by now you must have learned not to invite me again. This is the second round.
It is the second round. This is the first time we've actually had this somebody else who's already been on a podcast back for the second time, because Jeevan does such a fantastic job on our pilot episode, which was all about Wi-Fi 6. We had a great conversation. When was that? June?
That's right. Yeah.
Seems ages ago, but that was some 10 episodes, 10, 12, 11, I don't know. I've lost count. But we're into the double figures now on the episodes, and so I'm super excited to have Jeevan back again. Today we're going to be talking about security, and that's because Meraki's just made a pretty significant announcement of some new products and features that really do move us on to an exciting new phase of security. So we're going to dive into some of the detail of that as we get further into this particular episode. For now, I think it's a good idea for us to have a quick recap. Security, it's a pretty big deal for us at Meraki. And one of the things that I've noticed is that we have had a lot of feedback from our customers. What our research tells us is that security is top of mind for pretty much every IT administrator, IT decision maker out there. It just keeps on going. And, why do we think this is, Jeevan? What do you think?
There is hacks everywhere. There is malware everywhere. This is just, top of mind for everyone. People want to secure their networks, their data, absolutely everything.
It doesn't stand still either.
Exactly.
It's constantly changing. Just when you think you've got it all nailed and everything's buttoned down nicely, something else comes up online and we're back on the back foot again.
Exactly. If I were to quote my security folks, they would say the attack vectors keep changing.
Nice. It sounds fantastic, that, doesn't it? The attack vector. This is definitely security speak. We've been doing security at Meraki for a long time. We think, when was the product? What's the product called, first of all? I do know the answer, but
yeah, it's MX.
It's MX. The security appliance. And we introduced that in
2011.
So that's 8 years ago now. That's unbelievable. That's a huge stretch of time, and it's changed so much over that time. I remember some of the early features when I first arrived at Meraki. I had a little MX60. I'm sure there are still quite a few of those out there. Great little box. And, the first feature I remember playing with was Auto VPN. Tell us what that's all about.
It's just auto-magically, getting your VPN up between two different sites.
You just said on the Meraki Unboxed podcast, auto-magically. You can tell this guy's in marketing now.
That's right.
So you've just 3 clicks of your mouse, right, and your VPN is up. And
exactly.
That is so much of an improvement from the way that it used to be, certainly for any IT admin out there who's ever tried to connect 2 sites together. With VPN, it can be significant pain. AutoVPN is just one of those great features, but it's really evolved a huge amount since then as well. So tell us about how the product has evolved and what we've integrated and added to it over these last 8 years.
Yeah, after the AutoVPN, we have actually done the next generation firewall capabilities. There's a lot of rules that we've implemented within there. There is advanced malware protection, the integration with AMP. Cisco AMP. We've got the integration with Talos. We've got various APIs with the Cisco Defense Orchestrator. Now, this is a big deal that we've talked about recently.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen, various security leaders such as Jeff Reed, talk about, how Cisco Defense Orchestrator gives you one single location to actually track all security alerts, whether you're in a branch with MX or whether you're in a campus with firepower, and being able to aggregate all security alerts in one place and figure out and isolate and quarantine any issues.
So we're already covering a lot of ground, and I think one of the issues around security is the complexity associated with it, because there's a lot of sort of jargon and technical terminology related to implementing security well. We touched there on AMP.
That's right.
Which stands for?
Advanced Malware Protection.
Good job. Nailed it.
You got it.
So that's a huge one for us, being able to just interrogate those files that fly around the network on as email attachments, that kind of thing. The other one that's interesting is Talos. And I always remember Talos because before I set up this podcast for the first time, I chatted with the people who run a podcast called Beers with Talos, which frankly I think is a much more fun title than Meraki Unboxed. I think they nailed it. I mean, anything that you put beer into has got to be good. And so they have a really, it's a very interesting podcast. If you're deep into security and you really like keeping up with that, I definitely recommend you check that podcast out. But the Talos Group, hugely important, of course, because they provide us with some of those signatures we need. Right there is one of the big research groups out there on the internet.
That's right,
and part of Cisco as well. So that's a huge benefit that we've had. So security, I think we mentioned there that it's laced with lots of jargon and technical terminology, and so I guess that leads to problems in the real world with people actually implementing security well. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? So what are some of the challenges with trying to get security implemented efficiently?
I think you had a phenomenal blog about this, right? I mean, security starts with simplicity. One of the key things that I took away from this is there's a lot of human error. If you notice some of the hacks that have happened over the last few years, you will keep seeing that there was a firewall that was misconfigured. There is another appliance that was misconfigured, or some user just accidentally accessed a certain website, downloaded some, crazy attack. And then sort of, the challenge with that becomes we are talking about various different things that could go wrong. Mm-hmm. And then for implementing the fix to this, you have to go into various different command line interfaces or various different dashboard. So imagine having to manage different appliances for just routing functions, for different function on SD-WAN, different function on switching, and being able to sort of bounce between all these things. Most companies actually have a different dashboard for everything, and therefore...
Right, a lot of different products.
Yeah.
Right? They just buy... This is what I remember, is a new security capability comes along, somebody makes a box that does that thing.
Correct.
And then a company goes and buys that thing, and they end up with a pile of boxes and lots of complexity to deal with. Right?
And then a pile of security rules, right? Imagine you talked about joining in 2011. If somebody joined like 5 years before you and set up a bunch of rules, are you going to go back and look through 2,200 different rules and keep fixing them?
That's a nightmare.
There you go.
I don't want to think about that.
But this is what your and my, customers actually have to worry about, and these are the problems that they worry about.
Yeah. So so in other words, anything we can do to try to streamline, bring all of these security capabilities under one single dashboard. What a great name for it. I think that's a good plan. We should do that.
Exactly.
So we want to talk about how we're evolving that on this podcast episode today. I think one of the things which you and I chatted about before we pressed the record button was around what's happening with segmentation and how the security world is evolving. In the past, you really just thought about this big campus maybe just providing this umbrella protection for a whole site, so perimeter-based defense. But now it's got a lot more personal, a lot closer to the user, and I guess that's what we want to talk about, right? So maybe give us some examples like segmentation. Why do we even need to do this?
Sure. Let's kind of, simplify this firstly and explain what is segmentation and why do we care about it. So remember when you were a kid, you used to form a club.
Too long ago. Sorry,
Anyway, so for those who have kids, right? I mean, for those people that have kids, right? I mean, typically they'll form some sort of exclusive private clubs. These clubs are highly technical. They will have the first alphabet of each kid, forming the name of the club, and that particular club will be, exclusive for the few kids that are part of this. They will develop their own language, which invariably is some form of Pig Latin, and then they will sort of keep
remember
talking.
that.
There you go.
Yep.
And then they would talk in those languages, to keep, us adults out of it and other kids out of it, right?
Yep.
I mean, so even since we were from our childhood days, we've started working on sort of, segmentation and essentially having a language for which we keep other people out of this. And, when you start thinking about, the work environment, you might think about different side of things. So take, for example, a bank. So in this case, your bank will issue the teller a laptop. So that laptop will allow it to access only critical applications like point of sale. It would not allow you to access an unrecognized and unauthorized software and allow you to download that, and do crazy things with it. Because you've got really critical information. Your bank accounts, your millions of dollars would be accessible from that point of sale laptop. You don't want to access certain things with this. So these are the kinds of things that, there are various sort of, our customers care about.
How do you know that they care about that? So, I mean, it does sound, the theory is great. I love the stuff about the kids trying to keep the adults out and the separation of device types in a business setting as well. But what evidence do we have to know that our customers are thinking about segmentation at this point?
I think, I've heard about these stories in absolutely every single other segment. Think about a healthcare segment. The stories change. You've got your nurse, which needs access into critical applications such as nurse calling. But you don't want your guest to be able to access those critical applications that only your patients and your nurses can talk on. In a school environment, your story changes. You've got your teachers and your students, your research assistants that are allowed access into all the different research servers.
Right.
In a government setting, you might have, a different story that your DMV and your passport agency, you don't want them to be talking to each other and sharing critical information. You just want both of these to access a printer, both of these to access any typical devices. So these stories might change, but ultimately what ends up happening is we have group-based policies that are based on the user roles, the applications, and the devices.
Okay. And this is, so you've given there a few different examples. So this is where we've had feedback from the field from these type of verticals, right?
That's right.
That feedback comes back to us in all kinds of different ways.
That's right.
Right. We were talking about that a little bit earlier on. What do you tend to find it comes in through?
So essentially, the most popular thing that Meraki has, for getting feedback from customers is the wish list. So remember, you and I were pouring through, all these different wishes. There were 1,500 wishes that we looked at just in the last few months that talked about security.
Wow. Just in the last few months. It's nice to know people care that much. And it gives us that confidence, I guess, that we're developing things in the right direction. We know we're paying attention to what people really do care about at this time. Okay, so we know that it's important, and we've touched a little bit on segmentation there and how that's a new thing. I think that's a fairly significant part of this announcement that we've made this week. So let's have a look at some of the things we've announced. The list is quite long, so I don't know if we want to go into detail on all of them, but I definitely know there were a couple of ones that we were interested in talking about in the show today. First one up, I think, is trusted access.
Yeah.
So that sounds like it makes perfect sense. I could probably have a guess at what that might mean, but give us the official story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just quickly recap for you, right? I mean, just like our 1,500 sort of, different entries talked about, people care about security all the way from the client to the application. So the way that we've started releasing all these different capabilities, they're actually on every single Meraki product. So this is why, when we introduce Trusted Access, this is about, imagine you bringing your personally owned client device to your workplace
like
environment.
My smartphone.
Your smartphone, you might have your own iPad that you bring into work. And then, you might want to, access critical resources, without even installing an MDM through a certificate.
An MDM. So this is where...
Mobile device.
I've totally interrupted you. Your flow there. You were doing really, really well.
Yeah.
So just for an MDM, it's one of the solutions for personally owned devices and managing those and setting policies for those.
Right.
So that's something which we've been doing for a number of years.
Correct.
But you're saying MDM is one way of tackling it, but we've got something new and exciting.
Exactly.
It's an alternative.
So for example, let's kind of give a specific example. In a hospital environment, what you will find out is, a doctor is typically not an employee.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor is actually a contractor that comes in order to operate on people. And then what the doctor would do is they would bring in their own smartphone, and they would want to access critical information, such as the patient details on the smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're going to say, this is my own smartphone. Don't install an MDM on it.
Right. Yes, I have heard that before. That's the thing, because the MDM is often controlled by the IT team.
Exactly.
And if it's a personally owned device, and we've also encountered this in schools as well, I think, where schools have tried to implement that for personally owned devices, and parents don't always love it, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's
Absolutely.
a very valid point for sure.
So imagine when Dr. Simon walks into this particular hospital.
I like that. Sounds good. Dr. Simon.
And about to operate on Jeevan, now I'm scared. But I think
that's good. You should be.
But this is where, you would sort of, come in, sort of, you would access a specific website. You would be pointed to a place where you can download a certificate.
Yep.
And at that point, we would authenticate that this is actually Simon's smartphone, and you're allowed access into critical, information such as patient details. But because of this, you can actually securely access those details, and then sort of once you transition on to a different hospital to operate on somebody else, you can do the same thing.
So how's the user actually identified in that scenario? So Dr. Simon walks in with smartphone and wants to have a specific type of trusted access. Is this through a splash page login, or through a regular like Active Directory or something like that? What would you be using to actually identify this person and what they're allowed to do?
So absolutely, we would tie this into the Radius servers, and essentially when Dr. Simon walks in and he's about to access the internet, at that point, the network administrator has already configured a group that says these doctors are allowed to bring in their own devices, personally owned devices, and access the internet and access critical resources, which is why you would be the only people that are allowed to get access to this.
Got it.
Similar to employees.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a good thing to have for sure.
Absolutely.
And that's definitely a little bit of an advance on what we had before. Like I said, there are ways that we were able to do this in the past, but they're kind of clunky. And this is a lot more seamless, I think, the way that you've described it. Sounds really, really nice. Okay, so what's next?
So we talked about security at the client level. Now let's start moving on to the access port, the switch level security.
Okay.
So this is a new capability called Secure Connect. Now let me give you a reason why you should care first. So imagine, when Dr. Simon is walking into this hospital, now I've changed roles. Now I've started becoming a security hacker, or as I would call it, it's really a cracker. I'm going to start following you inside, and imagine if I have my hands full with a bunch of bags, you're going to look at me and say, this looks like a decent guy, with lots of bags in his hand. I'm going to allow, and keep the door open for you, right? I mean, I'm just going to follow you in. So at that point, I join you, and then suddenly I walk into some conference room. I'm going to find a conference room just like this, Simon, and I'm going to find an open Ethernet port like this.
Yep.
And how much would you want to bet that most customer environments, these Ethernet ports, are actually open?
Yeah, it's very common, right? They're just part of the regular network in many cases.
Absolutely.
And like you said, if you actually authenticate one device on a particular port sometimes, that's enough then to open the port up so that subsequent devices can also get connected. So what you were saying there is a really nice analogy, tailgating into a building. Like you're just walking in behind somebody who's badged in. This is really what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we tracked this, we saw that 90% of customer ports, are actually open by default. And this is a big problem. So you know what, Simon, back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, this is not rocket science. You could do this with any other product as well. The problem is you'll have to go switch by switch, port by port, and start securing it. This is a big problem.
Right.
And therefore, none of the customers implement it. This is why, Secure Connect essentially does is that it would basically say, hey, I'm a MR or an access point belonging to this hospital. I'm a MS or a switch belonging to this hospital. They're going to do an automatic handshake with each other. And because both of them have cryptographic chips within there, we have algorithms to determine and do a handshake with each other. They would both say, I belong to the same hospital, which is why that particular switch port will be opened up for that particular access point.
Right. So what you're describing is something which is even further than what I was talking about a second ago. Because the thing I was talking about, I forget the technical term for it, but it's essentially opening a port for the first MAC address, and then it allows every MAC address through. And there have been previously attempts to, and solutions out there that can say only the first MAC address gets access to the network. But what you're describing goes much further than that, because you're now actually talking about secure chipsets talking to each other and establishing that they are trusted buddies that are allowed to actually communicate with each other.
Exactly. And this is the power of the Meraki dashboard, because we can actually, match up the different devices belonging to the same company, to the same hospital, and essentially allow them to automatically, securely connect.
Right. So no more spoofing potential issues, right? Because that could be a big issue, spoofing MAC addresses.
Exactly.
To get around that previous
So therefore,
attempt.
the default is actually every port becomes turned off. And you would just turn on those ports, to which you trust, you connect trusted devices to. This
That's
is what
really
is Secure
nice.
Connect.
Yeah, that's a powerful one, and that really should help a lot with like you said, those ports that are not always configured necessarily correctly. You've got that extra peace of mind that it's going to be interrogating whatever's plugged into it to make sure it's really meant to be there. Nice, I like that a lot. The other one. We were talking earlier on about segmentation and how it changes, people move around and situations change. So that leads me on to this next one we mentioned before we came on air around adaptive policies. So you want to talk about those?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talked a lot about the different use cases in here. The gist of it is adaptive policy is really about, being able to apply group-based policies based upon users, devices, and applications. And I'm going to give you a couple more analogies to just sort of bring this home.
Love analogies.
I actually started in Meraki as a product manager. Even prior to this, I was an engineer. And then I changed role yet again, to the product marketing role, right? I mean, Simon, you changed roles as well, right?
Yeah. So it's one of the fun parts about it being in a really good company that you love is you get to sort of try out these different aspects of it.
And what's important with this is that, different roles get access into different things, different servers, different appliances, different IoT devices, and different applications. This is so much powerful, right? I mean, I've visited several customers wherein you've got thousands of different rules, and they are all static from past history. They are all static based upon IP addresses. I have a term for this. I call people IP administrators, not IT administrators, because they're actually tracking and keeping track of IP addresses.
Just that huge number of IP addresses, and that could get. I mean, on a campus, that could get a real mess. There's just way too much information. So I'm guessing adaptive policy helps us get around some of those challenges.
Absolutely. I think the beauty of this is that you can apply policies that are based upon user groups, that are based on device groups and application groups. Back to how we talked about, one of the things with this is incredibly sort of scalable. It allows you to do this. And just like user roles change, you might have, imagine if you're an IT administrator, every time I talk to my friends, they are talking about, hey, I have to throw out another IoT device because my CIO is throwing in connected lights. And then 3 months later, before that has happened, that has rolled out, pervasively, they are like, okay, roll out connected doorknobs, roll out connected something else.
Connected doorknobs. That's. I mean, a nice example. I'm trying to imagine that. The IoT. I mean, who knows what people are coming up with? That's the point, right? We have so many different potential devices trying to get connections and therefore needing to have security and policies following them.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is the part that, scares me the most, because the minute that, I'm able to hack into your connected lights, where am I going to go next? I might go into your connected doorknobs. I might get into your, switching closet. From there, I'll start getting into the distribution layer, the core layer, get over the whole network.
Right.
Maybe take up your data, right? I mean, this is where, it is incredibly important to actually segment your network into various logical groups. You only want certain things to talk to certain other things, certain people to have access into certain servers. And this is what, enables you. Adaptive policies, these glue, which actually enables you to bring it home.
And what I think is nice about what you're describing, if I understand it correctly, is that, we've been able to do this kind of security and lock communications down between devices. That's not new. But what is different is that we can now easily manage it at scale in a much more dynamic fashion. We're not relying on these static lists that somebody has to maintain over a period of time, which is, of course, where error comes in and problems like that.
Exactly.
That's definitely a big step forward. So we talked about lots of different security technologies here. I think one of the things that we should be also clear about, I think, is we have some new hardware that goes into this launch as well. And so there was something on the switching side. Tell us about what's happened there.
Absolutely. To enable some of these innovations, we are actually introducing a brand new edge switch. Now, this is the most powerful access switch Meraki Simon, over the last several years, we've introduced so many amazing switches. This is the most, biggest portfolio within Meraki. We are essentially introducing another awesome switch, which is the MS390. Now, this particular switch actually combines the simplicity of the Meraki dashboard with the power of Cisco silicon.
Oh, so we've actually embedded something new inside the switch. This is really what? This is the brain of the switch itself?
Yeah, absolutely. The silicon is essentially the UADP ASIC. And before you ask Simon, Unified Access Data Plane.
We should make this, you tell us, listeners, because I kind of feel like we should make this an acronym-free zone. Like, nobody's allowed to utter an acronym without knowing what it stands for. So what was that again? Say it again.
Unified Access Data Plane.
Beautiful. Did it perfectly.
Absolutely. But what this allows you customers to actually achieve is essentially, critical capabilities such as adaptive policy, to make it happen. This is the brains behind it, the power, the heart behind it that actually allows you to configure this and apply group-based tagging so that you can actually, implement these policies at scale.
Nice. Very nice. Okay, and I think there was another one that we introduced a little while ago on a part of our portfolio, which was what Cisco calls Umbrella.
Exactly.
Umbrella, for those who maybe haven't come across this before, you may have heard of a group called OpenDNS. That was an acquisition that Cisco made, was it a couple of years ago now, I think. And I'm a big fan of their T-shirts. They have a great T-shirt that says "Run DNS." So look out for them at the trade shows. I'm sure they're still making those. I think I saw one earlier this year. So tell us a little bit about what Umbrella is, and how it's part of this announcement we've been making this week.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, what does this do? So imagine if there are some of these contractors that come into work and they access some not safe for work websites. At that point of time, Cisco Umbrella actually protects us and the contractors, and they would basically block those particular websites from loading. So this is what Cisco Umbrella does. And what's amazing about this, almost 6 months ago, Simon, if you remember, we announced an integration with Cisco Umbrella wherein, you can actually configure, these rules per SSID. So, for example, you can say that certain sort of, real-time entertainment video applications, can be accessed on your guest SSID, but you cannot do it on your enterprise SSID because you are trying to protect critical resources. But when you are sort of, a guest, when somebody's kid comes into work, they're allowed to access Netflix at work. It's totally okay. So those are the kinds of rules that, Umbrella or some things can provide. But we had done those integration at that point. Now we are going even more further. We are actually announcing a single SKU wherein a customer can actually buy Meraki's MR capabilities as well as integrated Umbrella capabilities. So this particular thing makes it easier to purchase. But the second part of this is even more powerful. We are actually able to see all these different Umbrella security alerts within the Meraki dashboard. So this is where, back to the sort of, some of the things that we talked about, the problems that customers have. If you have your alerts on one dashboard and sort of you do everything else on another dashboard, there is a probability that you would probably miss some of the critical things and you would never go back and fix it.
Right.
Now you can actually access all the different Umbrella alerts within the Meraki Security Center itself.
Okay, so that's powerful. I think Umbrella is definitely an example where we've had capabilities that were roughly along these lines for several years. I think Umbrella just really takes it to the maximum. It's like an industry standard, really. OpenDNS was very well known beforehand. And I think really the key point here is that because customers aren't always going to care about all these different names that we're using within Cisco, things like Umbrella, the key thing is that you have that capability all within the Meraki dashboard, that it's all configurable. We've integrated those really best-in-class solutions directly into the platform.
Absolutely.
Nice. Well, that's a lot of stuff that we've talked about during this, and I think that's not even everything that was announced this week. Obviously, we had a blog post put up about that, so people can learn a little bit more about it there. What else are we doing to sort of spread the word and help people learn more about this?
I would just say, check out Meraki.com. You'd be able to see.
It's always a safe bet. Excellent idea.
You can see various different blogs. You can see more podcasts from you. We would sort of, be able to, take a look at the amazing website that captures all the security innovations. And then I would say always keep talking to your friendly Meraki salesperson and partners.
Always the case. And I think if anybody listening, if you would like to really get into a little bit more depth on any one of these features, be very happy to do a follow-up episode where we maybe just pick on one or two and we go deeper. Maybe even get some of the engineering or product management resources to come and chat with us as well to take us to that next level of depth here. I think this is a really nice overview that we've provided today that really does help, just kind of get the knowledge out there, see what kind of interest there is in learning more. Jeevan, thanks a lot again for joining us today for the second time.
Thank you, Simon. It's a pleasure, to join you for Security Made Simple.
Yeah, Security Made Simple. I love it. So we'll be back with another episode in a couple of weeks. And like I always say, we do really want to hear from you. I'd love to get your feedback. And you can contact me directly online at Meraki Simon on Twitter. Alternatively, if you have a look at the Meraki community, you'll find there are lots of like-minded souls in there who love talking about security all day, every day. So that's another good place to go and ask questions or maybe just share some feedback about the podcast. Would love to hear from you. So without further ado, from Jeevan and myself, I'd like to wrap things up for today. Hope you have a great day, and we will speak to you again very soon. Bye for now.